Hello and welcome to the Hoodcast. This one's about football. I was thinking of calling it the Footcast, but I don't want to confuse people with foot fetishes, so we've went for the Hoodcast again. So I'm joined today by Jack Hogg, my close friend, sort of amateurish comedian, and fellow long-suffering town fan, Jack Hogg. Jack, thank you for being with me today.
Not at all. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm especially amateurish in terms of being a comedian because I've never really written anything, and I did stand up once a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, so
We're trying to
definitely on the
coax you
amateur
back
end.
into doing it properly, aren't we?
Trying to, yeah.
I've been trying to bully you into it for years now, since your first gig.
Yeah, and I guess like to be fair, if venues are slowly reopening and it's, minimal capacity, that might actually be, good conditions for, kickstarting a stand-up career as such. But yeah, we'll see, we'll see.
Yeah.
Don't have anything else going on in my life, really.
Apart from chonging cans and
Chonging cans,
the Book of
eating
Common
pork
Prayer.
pies, yeah, all the good stuff.
Yeah, very wholesome, Jack. So today we're going to go, because the Prem starts again, isn't it, next week?
Yes, I think it is. Let me double check.
Yeah.
I've Yeah. I think it should be. Let's
Yeah,
have a
first
look.
matches will be played on the 12th of September. So that's a
Yeah.
couple of weeks from now still, but that's still like it's not ages
No.
away.
So
It's like next Saturday, really. So
yeah, yeah. Very, very close. Like especially considering like it felt like yesterday when the last season ended.
yeah, and you often especially when you don't have international competition, the summer period without football can be really, really long and boring.
Yeah, like that's true. I guess like that's definitely one thing I haven't missed this time around. But yeah, do we know if like after this season if they'll try and go back to normal with the scheduling? Like if a season will have the same span as they used to?
I would assume so, but I don't want to, be drawn on it too much because, you know, no one knows. I don't even think they though at this point. It's just too early to tell. And obviously it sucks not being able to go to the matches and that
Ye-
schedules have upended, but rather that than people die, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a small sacrifice to make, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, and I think now that especially the lower leagues, non-league is allowing limited capacity because it just wouldn't survive without it.
Oh
And
yeah, like I'll say I saw that like FC Aberystwyth. I think that they're called FC Aberystwyth and not like Rovers or Town or anything. Anyway, so I saw that yesterday. Like they played a non-league game because obviously they're a non-league side, and they had two supporters there, just like two people watching the game. I mean that's kind of I can't tell if that's better or worse than having no one there.
yeah, that's I don't know. I think it's just kind of funny. I think it's good for the memes,
Yeah.
and it will stop people from Leeds, and I think a lot of German clubs did it where they put like random faces. You could send your own face, and it'd be put on like a cardboard cutout in the
Oh
game.
God, yeah,
And you
that's
had
just
like Madeline McCann, Bin Laden, Purple Aki. What? How could they not?
Yeah, it's just like you would have thought they would have learned the lessons by now. Like, this
Yeah,
this sort of thing happens on the internet all the time.
it
But
was.
I think with regards to specifically, just like a point I think I really want to shoehorn in, with regards to non-league football, I think I'd happily watch, something in the Conference South or maybe an even lower league than that in person than like watching Reading versus Preston on like Sky Sports, especially
Yeah,
with no crowd there. Like I'd rather watch paint dry
I think
than some of those games.
not being funny, Reading is the most quintessentially boring club. I remember the season when the Championship playoff final was Huddersfield versus Reading, and it was the dullest fixture I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, it's just um absolutely. It's I don't know. It's I'm just trying to think the last time I actually watched. Now that Town aren't in the Championship, I'm trying to remember the last time I watched a Championship game that wasn't one of the playoff games or involving a team that was close to the playoffs. Like I can't remember the last time I watched like an inconclusive or inconsequential Championship game. It is a bit of a weird league in that sense. Because I
Yeah,
know this was saying we were discussing informally like the other day, how top 10 teams in the championship, it's insane. It's huge competition. Like you could finish 10th in that league, and 5-10 years ago you would have been in the playoffs or automatically promoted. Like the standards have gone up so much. But I think when people refer to, oh, it will the championship form kind of like a little breakaway Premier League 2, similar to how you have Bundesliga 2, for example, or League 2 in France. I think people seem to forget that most teams who finish beneath 10th in the championship are nothing to sing home about. Tend to
no,
be, that's where you really get, your Readings, your Birmingham Cities, your Preston North Ends, and then just the people who get relegated, sorry, the teams who get relegated tend to be fairly dire.
yeah. There's kind of a real drop off outside those teams that are challenging for playoff places. Like that part of the league is really competitive and fun, and then you can get teams below that just playing football that absolutely whiffs.
I know but like that said, I think the thing that makes the championship quite attractive, quite exciting, as well as the high standards of the competition, because obviously that's something you get in, towards the top end of the Premier League as well, and pretty much with any league. I think the exciting thing about the championship, I guess, is pretty much every season there'll be one breakaway team that you just don't expect to do
Yeah.
well. So for all my many criticisms of them, the season when we got relegated and then Norwich were promoted, I think they finished like saying like 14th the season beforehand. They were mid-table like us the season
Yeah, they
before.
finished below us by like 4 places or something like that.
Yeah, like but you would not have earmarked them for promotion. And at the start of that season, it looked like they could be going down as well, or certainly not moving towards the top of the league. So I guess in that sense, the championship's pretty exciting. And it's sometimes it is the case that it's only now when you realise, oh, Bournemouth, they've been relegated. Some people say it's a long time coming. But that season in the championship when they went up, like who would have thought that?
They were ridiculously unplayable as well. I remember being happy to only lose to them 2-1 at Portman Road.
Hmm.
And they did exceptionally well, and they just sort of came out of nowhere. And there is that element of kind of chaos theory, that chaos that I like about the championship, in that a lot of teams, most notoriously Sunderland, believe that when they go back down, sort of similar to Ipswich's HMS piss the league, they'll just go
Yeah,
straight back up, really easily win it, finish with like 110 points, and then they finish like mid-table a lot of the time, or in the relegation battle, or just go straight or go down again the following season. It's a lot harder than they than they think it is when they go into, for
Oh,
a lot of teams
oh yeah,
when they
yeah,
get
and
relegated.
you're quite right there to use the Ipswich example this season, like when we, absolutely were pissing the league until November, and then just everything falls off. And I guess I think the examples of teams like Bournemouth, like Hull City when they were good and just went up with that like Dean Windass volley in the
Yeah,
playoff final. It always seems to be those teams that have got, the championship is the highest they've ever been. They've got nothing to lose. Like that kind of factor always helps.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, think of like how it's taken Leeds this long to finally reach the Prem, and how Derby County seem to be in a similar kind of boat, in terms of not being able to get up there. Like, sure, Brentford have tried on many occasions, and they've always seemed, like favourites to go up to the Prem. But also, I don't think any of their fans have that expectancy immediately, or at least they're not holding them to the same standard. They realise they haven't come from the biggest backgrounds. They haven't, I think I might be right in saying that Brentford have never played in the top flight. So it's not like they've got that kind of lost past or lost golden era that they have to return to.
No.
I don't. Yeah. Sorry. This is a bit waffly, but yeah. So yeah, I guess that's kind of why I find the championship attractive, and also conversely, why those sort of mid-range teams who always seem to perpetually be there, I just can't stand watching them on like BT Sport. It's awful.
Yeah, I steer well clear from a lot of these fixtures, especially now that Ipswich aren't in the running there. And so moving on to our main item of discussion, me and Jack are going to be going through the Premier League and comparing tables to see which one of us gets the most right. And I don't know how we're going to score this, or if we even are. There could have been a forfeit. We didn't arrange it. I think we're just mostly doing this for fun. But what I've done is I've got my table right in front of me. I've thrown a few curveballs in there just to make it a bit more interesting. But why not? But yeah, Jack, are you ready to go through the Prem?
Oh, I am absolutely winging this. Like, I need to get like a pen and paper or something. Like, just but yeah, in terms of, or I don't think I'll contradict myself at any point, or say the same team twice. Wait a second. Yeah, so sorry about this level of organisation for you, Aaron.
It's totally fine. It was on such short notice. I just thought.
Well, that's the thing. But I think it's just like I've got like the bulk of it. It's just like one or two positions perhaps. But no, I've got my pen and paper to hand. So did you want to go first, or should I?
Yeah, I was going to start from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Just made more sense for me. I think personally that Man City are going to win it next year. I just think that they've got such even if they don't get Messi, which I don't think they will get Messi this summer. It's just too much money, and even if they got him on a free, his wages, it'd be just a stupid amount of money, and they've only just gotten away with financial fair play as it is. So I just very sincerely doubt that he's going to go anywhere this summer. But I think they've already splashed the cash, quite tamely for them on like 20 odd mil for Ferran Torres from Valencia to replace Sane, and Nathan Ake from Bournemouth for like 30 million, which seems like the standard price for an average to good centre back in the Premier League these days. They probably need another centre back and maybe start looking into another backup left back, and it might benefit them to start playing for life without Aguero, considering it's his last year in his contract, and he is getting on a bit in age. He's still a very prolific goal scorer despite his dodgy hamstrings, but he's 32 years old. He's coming in. This is the last season of his contract. He's constantly reiterated his desire to finish his career in Argentina. It's going to be a rough ask for them to replace 180 goals in 263 appearances. That's a ridiculous number, isn't it? It's not Messi or Ronaldo, but it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think they're going to have trouble replacing Aguero, or do you think since it's Man City, they've just got stupid money, so they'll bring in like Dybala or Lautaro Martinez next summer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, in all honesty, yeah, I think they can replace him. Just I think Man City have now obviously established themselves um as a Premier. I was going to say a Premier team, but but it's the Prem. But they've clearly found their feet. They've won quite a few titles now. And until last season were pretty unplayable. Um, I genuinely think they can replace Aguero with without too many problems. Obviously, as you say, they've got the financial backing for it. But if I were a prospective footballer, Man City just seems like a very attractive club. They've got formation, they've got that sorted out. The quality of the players you'd be playing alongside, and obviously it's a kind of club where they're because it's easy to say they're well financed, they're rich. Many clubs in the Premier League are, but you can imagine Man City hugely inflating your wages if you had a few offers. Like let's say you had an offer from, I don't know, Juventus, one from Munich, one from Man City. I think out of those three kind of clubs, I can imagine City going above and beyond with your contract. I can imagine them paying you ludicrous wages.
Yeah, especially since Bayern have a tendency to sign up and coming mostly German players on a free when their contract ends, or for like a really cut right price when they're at the end of their contract. Like they were quoted last summer like 150 mil minimum for Sane, and they've got him for I think 40 million this summer, which is just a ridiculously low fee for such an incredible player, to be honest.
I mean, you're right, and I think just when you just sit and think about the Man City lineup, imagine being a striker who works with Kevin De Bruyne. It's you're not
having to struggle too hard, are you?
No, and it seems like a great club, a great setup for if it takes you a little while to find your feet. Let's say Man City's the first English club you've played for, and the Prem's a completely new ball game to you. It definitely seems like the kind of club where, because of their setup, because of their formation, because of possible backup options, it's quite easy to gel in without too much initial criticism. I think if I was a striker, I would pick Man City even over Liverpool. I think Man City have that solid basis. They've proved themselves time and time again. Perhaps not in Europe, but definitely within the Premier League. They won't have any issues convincing someone to join them. And if you look at the quality of players that they can afford, they have so many options.
Yeah, they're just overwhelmingly good. And I think the only thing that let them down is their defence. I still personally rate John Stones. Guardiola obviously doesn't, but obviously his confidence is shot to bit, especially since he started playing a 35-year-old Fernandinho or a 19-year-old Eric Garcia who wants to leave and go back to Barcelona instead of him. His confidence is shot to bits. He's as much as I rate Guardiola as a manager, he's doing the same thing to Stones as he did to Joe Hart, and just kind of scapegoating him a bit, and then not freezing him out of the club essentially, which is a shame. And if that Chelsea have signed kind of two centre backs, but I think like if he gets forced out even more, I think John Stones would be a great pickup for a United. They would never sell to United, but for a Chelsea or an Arsenal or a Tottenham, I think John Stones would be a brilliant pickup for them.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I just think to summarise, they've already signed one player to sort out the defence. Garcia's going to leave. Stones might leave if they can get enough replacements in. Otamendi they should get rid of because he's an absolute donkey, totally useless. But who did you have winning the title this year?
I reckon it's obviously going to be a bit more, tightly knit than last year. But I'm thinking Liverpool will do it again, but this time by the skin of their teeth. I think now that the curse has been lifted, especially, and because, obviously, I think. Look, I still think it's very much a case of, and you're not going to be surprised to hear me say Man City are my choice for second. So spoiler alert for that. I think they're still by far the two dominant forces in the Premier League, and I don't think that structure is going to change too much this season. But I think Liverpool, quite simply, if you look at their strike force, if you look at even someone like Alisson in goal. They're phenomenal. I can't see how a team who won by as many points as they did last season can throw it away, especially now that they've shaken that kind of that kind of bottle mentality. And if you look at their structure, if you look at the starting lineup, even their options on the bench. I don't think they have to tweak too much. I think Klopp has found the formula. It'll take this season, I think, for Man City to truly catch up again. But no, I think Liverpool will do it, albeit with reduced points total.
Yeah, I think that it will definitely be a lot closer this year than it was last year. I certainly don't think they will go unbeaten for as long as they did this season. This season just passed, but I think that I don't know. I think in terms of if you analyze Klopp's career when he was at Dortmund, this is very much kind of the time scale. He rebuilt them, they won the titles, and then they started to decline. So it really, as much as I rate Klopp, I think it's going to be really challenging whether he can, to separate him just from a really, really great manager to a like iconic manager like a Sir Alex Ferguson,
where he true.
makes a dynasty and he just wins it year in, year out for several years, winning all of the major trophies. But obviously, incredible manager. And I'll share a bit more about my views on Liverpool in more detail when I get to them.
You're absolutely right, and I think especially when you think about the Klopp era, it's a very, very similar scenario in the sense that was a two-horse race in the Bundesliga, with Bayern obviously being a bit more established at that point. But I think when you look at that Bayern Munich team, especially around 2013, I think that could be considered, one of the decade's best football teams. And as great as I think Man City are, I don't think they're quite that level of threat. But as I've said, they're still an incredible side. I can't see anyone knocking them off the pedestal of second or being Liverpool's closest rivals this season. And I think a lot of this season will come down to how quickly Man City catch up, their summer signings, because that's obviously a huge issue right now. And one thing that goes against everything in our predictions as they currently stand, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of who's brought in, who leaves. But I think as things currently stand, it's got to be Liverpool for me.
That's fair enough. I totally understand that. And for second place, you've went with City, who I predicted would win it this year, coming year.
Yeah.
Do you just think that obviously it'll be a lot closer, but do you think even irrespective, the variable of who they recruit, after this podcast releases. Do you think they just, in terms of, there seems to be very much like a fractional difference in terms of the actual talent in both of those squads? Do you think it will just come down to, the fine margins in terms of what separates Liverpool and Manchester City?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's a bit of a cliched remark to make, but I think it really depends on, how they hit the ground running with their first, bunch of games. I think a lot of Liverpool's ultimate success came down to the fact that they had an incredibly strong start and that, the points as a result became ludicrous in terms of the difference there. But that said, if you look at Liverpool's first few games, they're up against Leeds, which, to be fair, I think they should win, pretty comfortably. But then they're up against Chelsea and Arsenal. And did you watch the Community Shield final?
I did. It was really, really dull.
Yeah.
As the Community Shield often is. It's the odd cliche of, if you win it, it's nice. And then if the team loses, the manager can just turn around and say, well, it's basically a friendly. It's only the Community Shield.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think there was much that can really be gleaned from the Community Shield, to be honest, as an analysis for the season.
No.
Apart from the fact that Arteta seems to have finally stabilised Arsenal after years of just absolute mayhem at that club. But I'm sure we'll touch on that later.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in second, I have went for a curveball because I got bored. I have predicted that Chelsea will finish second next season. There are some caveats to that. I put if they get rid of Kepa and sign a decent quality number one goalkeeper. Like I could see them, if they went in for Dean Henderson from Man United, even Nick Pope from Burnley. They've been linked to Donnarumma from AC Milan, which I think would be an amazing get on the last year of his contract. They've been linked with Oblak, but they've already spent so much money, and his release clause, they're very much stuck in their heels. I don't see them paying another 120 to 140 million on a goalkeeper, especially since they broke the record for a goalie. And on Kepa, and that didn't turn out really well. I think last season he had the worst save percentage in the Premier League in terms of that. That was how bad he was. He was worse as a goalkeeper than Pickford or, Roberto or Tom Heaton. Not Krul. He just had an absolutely shocking season. But some of the moves they've made in the transfer window already, Werner and Ziyech, Ben Chilwell, Thiago Silva and Malang Sarr, both on frees. They're still linked with Stones, another goalie. Kai Havertz is basically imminent. I think because they saved, it's kind of worked out for them very, very well in a way, the coronavirus, and the transfer ban, because they couldn't spend that year. They decided not to spend in January, despite the fact that they snuck Pulisic and Kovacic through the door before the ban kicked in, and they've both been really, really good for them. Now they're in a position where they've got all of that money saved up, plus the 200 mil they got from Hazard and Morata's sales to Real and Atleti, respectively. I think they're one of the few teams that can properly spend a lot of money in this transfer window, and they're making use of it, and they've built a really genuinely exciting squad. And I think having all of that influx of top talent into a side on that scale, completely reworking the squad, I think that's going to be a huge problem, and they won't be too far away from the proper elite level that Man City and Liverpool are at. Whereas I think even the other top six clubs that can challenge for the top six are still, they've made progress in the sense that they've stabilised a bit, but they're still, in terms of quality and consistency, a lot further away from the top two.
Yep.
So I think they've made a huge step in the right direction doing the business that they have. And I think that you know, again, I think at minimum they should finish third next year. I don't think they have enough to win it. I just still think Man City and Liverpool are just still too good. But I think they'll finish second. I'm gonna, even though it's Liverpool, I'm going with Chelsea for some reason. I just have a funny feeling, and I wanted to spice it up a little.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, because I know I kind of like tapped into my views that I think, obviously the era of the big four's dead, and that, I take the kind of popular opinion that right now Liverpool, Man City are the two dominant forces. So what I'm kind of hoping to see this season, um, is, teams that were previously big four, so predominantly Chelsea and Arsenal, kind of emerge, especially as one Chelsea, as you say, make those big signings, have a bit more comfort and room to do that now. I think Frank Lampard, he had obviously a pretty successful season, all things considered, last season. And then, as you say, Arteta's, starting to find his feet in terms of who he's playing. Aubameyang, quite a prolific striker there. I can see Arsenal doing some jobs this season, and then as a result, I kind of hope that things are shaken up a bit more, and that first and second place aren't as predictable as they have been for the past few seasons.
Yeah, with the only exception really being the Leicester title winning year.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah, that was that was like it's kind of it's starting to feel like quite an age ago, isn't it?
it certainly is. It feels like that was kind of the last hurrah for proper, you know, chaos and something in really genuinely interesting and non-predictable
Mm,
happening in sport, especially the Premier League. But and I don't think we'll see it's like again. I think the gulf between the elite clubs in the league and even the plucky ones like your Wolves and your Leicesters
mm.
is a lot is a lot wider than it ever has been. And Leicester, I think, got really really lucky to finish fifth this season. It would have been a hell of a fluke, especially with how poor they were in the running for them to get Champions League football. Even though I sort of wanted them to because I really like them as a club. I'm quite
Yeah.
fond. But in terms of third, who have you went with for third, Jack?
So it might not be too surprising, but I actually put Chelsea for third place. Just for very similar reasons as you did. As I said, the kind of the huge boosts of those signings. I think Lampard's pretty comfortable in the job. He seems to know what he's doing there. For me, because fourth place with the squad he had last season was a good result. And with these signings, it seems to be like things can only get better. So hence why I'm putting Chelsea down for third place.
Yeah. I just do you think that do you add the caveat as well as me that that they need to get rid of Kepa, or do you think that he should be given a second chance?
I agree. I mean, personally, I would get rid of Kepa. But then again, I think if they do and they bring in, and they bring in a better replacement, um, I don't think that'll have too much of a consequence of where they finish in the table. I'm saying, a solid third place. Definitely somewhere in that top four for a Champions League place. However, it might be that a new keeper would mean that they're a close third or very close to second rather than if they keep someone who's clearly not quite up for the job.
I think in terms of the gap between the top four expanded quite rapidly. I think it's going to contract a lot this year.
Yeah,
Maybe not the fourth won't will probably finish still quite far away from it, but the top three, I wouldn't be surprised if there's only a few points in it in terms of like one or two games and a draw or goal difference because of the standard that those teams are we're talking about. It's certainly a lot more competitive of a title race than last year, I feel.
yeah, I'm 100%.
Yeah. All right. So Who have you went for fourth? Because I've went for Manchester United.
I see. I went for Arsenal.
You went for Arsenal. Do you want to expand on your reasoning for that?
Yeah, sure. I think that obviously Arsenal fans are a bit like town fans in the sense that even when we go through a bit of a run of good form, they're quite cynical. But following the fact that they won the FA Cup, they're clearly proving that Arteta's doing something right. It's definitely a step up from the Emery era, and I think that will bring a lot of confidence as a result. And to be honest, given that success in the cup, given the kind of hype that's around them at the moment, I don't think they may need to make too many changes to their squad as it stands. As we know, Arsenal has, quite a good system for loaning out youngsters. And then who knows, perhaps we might see one or two unexpected surprises there. That's my personal inclination. But I think Aubameyang, especially considering it looks like he's definitely going to stay at Arsenal, I think we're going to see an even better season from him this year. And that's personally, just a brief overview as to why I think Arsenal will finish fourth. Kind of as you hinted there, it might be the case that they finish fourth, but, there's the top three kind of run away with the points. I think that's a pretty realistic scenario. But when I look at the other competition, when I consider, who else could be going for the Champions League, the teams that finished quite high up last season, but completely ran out of steam. I think Arsenal have gone in the opposite direction, winning a cup so close to the start of a new season will only do wonders for them.
Yeah, I think so, and they'll definitely secure European football without having to win a cup this year. I think they'll automatically qualify.
Yep.
And signing up Aubameyang's huge for them. They still, I think, need to get Ozil off there. If they're not going to play Ozil, they need to get him off the wage bill, even if they have to buy him out of his contract a little bit, and then maybe look into getting Coutinho on loan. But that's looking less likely because he seems more part of Koeman's plans than he was previously his time as Barcelona, which hasn't worked out as well as I thought it would, and a lot of people had thought and hoped that it would. But they definitely are missing a attacking midfield fulcrum creator, very much in the De Bruyne vein, from their side. Now that they don't really play Ozil, there's no one really to fill that void. The only thing is, I think what stopped me saying that they'd finish top four is that I do believe that, especially since they extended Luiz's contract, and they probably still need to get a shot of Kolasinac, Mustafi, and Mustafi, Chambers, and Socrates.
Yeah,
I still think their defense is going to be quite leaky and gaff prone, and I haven't seen enough of Pablo Mari to really make a decision either way about him. He got injured quite quickly. Saliba, which a lot of Arsenal fans are raving about, he's 19, 20. And for him to come in and just fundamentally fix such a porous defence, I think is putting too much weight on his shoulders. Even Gabriel, who looks imminently due to arrive from Lille, having beaten off Man United, Napoli, amongst others, for his signature. He looks very promising, but is still very much an unknown quantity. I just thought with fourth, I went with Man United. That they look like a completely different team with Bruno Fernandes in there. Pogba's playing a lot better. Martial and Rashford playing a lot better with him in the squad. Greenwood looks spectacular. I doubt they're going to get Sancho. I'll go into that in a minute. Not this summer. Especially since Borussia Dortmund gave him a deadline and that went, and they don't really see the need because he signed a new deal. So he's got a few years left on his contract, so they don't need to sell him in the same way they traditionally have. They've just agreed a 40 million fee for Donny van der Beek from Ajax, who can play anywhere in the midfield, which will mean they won't have to play Matic as much, because I think now that he's getting older, he will need a lot more time on the bench and get a lot less game time, even though he's handy to have. And McTominay and Fred are just not there yet for me. And Pereira, I think, is absolutely dog shite. So
yeah,
that was a very good bit of recruitment for them. And I think that, especially if they get a good left-sided centre-back, which they're crying out for as much as they're crying out for an established right winger, because Greenwood does a job in there, but he's very young, and you don't want him to go the way of Michael Owen, just picking up so many injuries, because we did see it happen to a lesser extent with Rashford last season with his back, when he was playing so many games for them because they didn't have any other options, and Solskjaer kind of ran him into the ground in that way. They definitely need, like, that. Sancho would be a huge pickup for them. I just think they've fluffed it, which Edward does have a habit of fucking up transfers. It took them a window longer than it should to get Ander Herrera. They said no to an offer 50 million for Leighton Baines and Fellaini, and then they ended up spending 35 million on just Fellaini after they missed the deadline for that deal. It seems that he's finally became vaguely competent at transfers, but it seems like they've not played their hands well at negotiations for Jadon Sancho at all. And that's kind of what's keeping them from being a title challenger, is that they need more consistent centre backs. They probably could do another left back, and they definitely need that right winger. But I still think they've got more than enough to get Champions League football again this year. But they're still not as far away from some of the other kind of clubs that orbit that position than they would have liked. They're still not on the level of a Man City or a Liverpool, maybe even a Chelsea, if depending on how the season rolls out. But they're not miles away from either, the Europa League teams or the other Champions League sides. They're kind of like they've been so poorly ran since Ferguson left that they're only just starting to look like Manchester United again.
Like, I think I'll like one player I'll be watching with close interest there is obviously Van der Beek. Now that the fee's been agreed there, it's always hard to tell with someone like that, isn't it? It always seems to be there's always like a sense of inhibition that Manchester United sign a pretty promising youngster, someone that gets a lot of media attention in that sense. You can't help but feeling like it could be yet another messed up transfer or a missed opportunity, but you never know. And I guess that is the really exciting thing about huge transfers like this. But I think with their performance last season, with everything you've said, I completely understand why you'd put Man U there. And I agree that's a pretty fair judgment.
Yeah. I think it's nice that we've not just agreed on everything for the top four. I mean, I admit a lot of it was me putting Chelsea second was entirely just to shake things up. But I'm guessing, who have you put for fifth? I'm guessing you put Man United.
Not quite. I've actually put Spurs.
You put Spurs?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a hell of a curveball.
Exactly.
What have you seen from Spurs that has given you that confidence?
That is a good question, and to be honest, I understand why it might be viewed as a curveball. There doesn't seem to be much evidence, and last season wasn't exactly inspiring for them. But to be honest, and I know this is a bit of a cop-out answer, I know this might go a bit unsubstantiated, but I put a lot of faith into Mourinho as a manager. I think he has an incredible track record. And I think now that he's got a full season ahead of him, I really think he can turn it around. Like and because I completely agree with everything you said about Man United there, it was a bit tough to put it down completely, because I was humming and hawing about who I should put fifth and sixth. So I did end up putting Spurs fifth ahead of Man United, perhaps as you say, as a little curveball. But I genuinely think the Mourinho factor is going to be huge this season, and I think in terms of the difference between both clubs, I think it's going to be minimal. I think Spurs, Man United, it could be a matter of 1 or 2 points dividing them this season. And I think if Man United finish sixth, it won't be so much a reflection of their performance and how they've handled things, but rather just the sheer increase in quality in all the other teams that I've discussed. I think an important factor for Man United will be, the whole Harry Maguire debacle, especially considering he's still a bit of a signing that quite a lot of fans regret, don't they? I mean, if you consider how much they paid for him, it is kind of a classic case of, oh, he starts in the England team, therefore we're going to pay a ludicrous sum for him. But you never know. I think the whole, because he is still a central linchpin of that team, I think the whole debacle in Greece, if that throws his career off the rails a bit, if it really affects his performance on the pitch, or if there is some long-term legal repercussions there, I think that will be quite troubling for Man U. And it's perhaps why I haven't, that's perhaps why my gut told me Spurs slightly ahead of United there.
Yeah. And there is that kind of X factor of second season Mourinho, where that always seems to be when he's got a few of his players in, he's sorted out the squad, especially after them recovering from the hangover of the Champions League final and the disappointment of leaving. And I think Eriksen leaving halfway through the season was a huge blow. They went a long part of the season without having any recognised strikers, which has been a problem for them for years. In terms of when Harry Kane isn't fit, what the fuck did they do up front? But I wouldn't be surprised if Spurs snuck into fifth, maybe even fourth.
Exactly.
But I don't know.
I think it's kind of, it was similar to, in a way, to what I was saying about, Man City. They've got a pretty established squad there. I think Højbjerg is going to be quite a good signing for them. He seems to be a very solid, reliable centre mid, and he might be a bit of an old school player in that sense, but I think it gels in really nicely. And despite a disappointing season last season, I can't see them flogging off any of their big stars.
No, they've got them on 2 big contracts. Levy drives a really hard bargain as a negotiator.
Yeah,
it's just a shame he's just as reluctant usually to release those funds to the club. Getting Lo Celso permanently was a really good bit of business. The only they've got Matt Doherty from Tottenham because they just needed another right back, and I think it was just a bit of shuffling that Doherty went to Tottenham, so Wolves could get Maitland-Niles from Arsenal because they needed the cash. Because Arsenal need the cash. So it's a bit of kind of like, transfer logistics. Like there was that one season where Arsenal wanted Aubameyang, but they wouldn't sell him if they couldn't get a replacement striker. So they had to agree to sell Giroud to Chelsea, and so Chelsea would agree to loan Batshuayi to Dortmund. So it's that kind of, not as big of a faff as that, but similar kind of wheeler dealing.
It's odd, isn't it? Because I think Tottenham are one of these teams where, as you say, it's kind of a bit of wheeling dealing. Especially in the Redknapp era. But they still have like an enormous amount of clout. I think they're still seen as one of the top teams in England. Um, the fact that they've got an all or nothing documentary series kind of feeds into that.
They
I
have
mean,
the
I
best
know
stadium they have arguably one of the the best stadium or one of the best stadiums in the country now. They have some of the
exactly,
best training facilities in football.
but
They've done really well. I think in a couple of years they could really go for the title again.
that's the thing though. They've seemed to have everything but the silverware
Yeah.
to back it up. And I think it's an interesting point that even though I wasn't taking it seriously, and I wouldn't expect to see it in a million years. But as soon as the Messi story broke, Tottenham were one of the clubs being discussed, saying
Yeah.
like, if he's going to go to England, Tottenham would be a good club for him in that sense. And although I personally can't see it happening, I wouldn't be too shocked if he did offer him, because as you say, they're a very sleek modern club. They've got all the facilities. They're quite well known. It is just a case of it might take them another couple of years to get there. And if Ali and Kane are still at the top of their game by then, they'll be a force to be reckoned with. Um, but my theory, as I say, fifth place, I can see the start of that happening this season.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think I'll add a caveat for when I place them, but I could see them, having that just classic second wind from Mourinho. I put Arsenal as my fifth choice because I think that they'll definitely won't need to win a cup to qualify, although they still might. And it just seems like they still need a couple of years of sorting out that defence and then getting Ozil off the bill and restructuring in that way. And obviously they're having huge cash flow issues. So I think once they sign Aubameyang down and get Gabriel in, I don't think they'll have enormous sums of money to strengthen further. So I think it'll be a year of kind of hopefully winning the Europa League, getting through to the Champions League that way, and kind of consolidating back in the top six, like as a default standard of performance for Arsenal, like top six minimum kind of thing. But we've obviously discussed Arsenal at length. So I was going to move down to my sixth, which is Spurs.
Yeah.
I was umming and ahhing between them and Wolves, who I put seventh, because I just really rate Nuno Espirito Santo and the squad they have. And if they manage to, strengthen, they could be, a big deal as a club. And
No,
obviously,
I agree. And actually, I put Wolves in seventh place as well.
we're in agreement. We're in agreement for once, Jack. That's nice.
I know.
But I think I added the caveat that Spurs will win a cup this season. They'll win either the Carabao Cup or the Europa League or the FA Cup, or maybe two of those. I think they'll win one or two trophies this year. It won't be the big ones, but I could see them winning the Europa League under Mourinho, definitely.
And just imagine the boost that would give them.
Yeah, definitely. And then they could kind of be forgiven for not doing as well in the league, and maybe Mourinho could actually complete a third end year of his contract and maybe enter into a fourth season with a club consecutively for the first time. That would be interesting. I just think still, especially if they get rid of Aurier, they need another right back. Even though they've recruited Doherty, they did a good bit of business getting Højbjerg in. They need another left back. They need a centre back to replace Vertonghen because he's a huge loss to the club. They need to start thinking about life without Lloris. Even though he's their captain and amazing keeper, he is slowing down a bit over the last couple of seasons, and he's 32. He's 33 years old, I believe. Yeah. And they've got that massive problem of, Eric Dyer being a bit crap, Harry Winks not really living up to his potential as much as he should. But I still rate Harry Winks, and he just seems not to rate Ndombele. Their record signing, and he can't get a game for them. He's either not fit or Mourinho just doesn't like him.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe there is something happening in the dressing rooms.
Yeah. So for sixth, so who did you put for your sixth?
So I put Spurs fifth and then Man United sixth. Like as I say, it was like a very kind of close run thing, and I was humming and hawing over it. So yeah,
What to you? What to you gives you the gives Spurs the edge over Man United for you?
I think it is just as I said. I think it is the Mourinho factor.
Yeah, purely just that.
Yeah, genuinely. I know it's cheesy. I know it's not really saying, but it's hard to prove or disprove. But Spurs' fifth is a mini curveball that I'm putting there.
That's an educated curveball. It's not like a ridiculous one.
No, yeah, that's the thing where if you're going to run a purely rational model for getting the Premier League, it would be pretty much all the same positions as the last season.
Yeah.
Circumstances change. There are psychological factors off the pitch. But I'm glad that we both agreed on Wolves
Yeah.
for seventh. Like that seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I just think because they ranked in the bottom three, the top three in terms of least squad players used in the season, and especially since it overran and they had the Europa League run out and they still finished very respectively. Their players must have been absolutely knackered. I mean, when they got knocked out by Sevilla, who obviously won the Europa League because they just tend to do that.
Yeah.
It just seems, and Nuno Espirito Santo obviously his contract's running out either this year or next year, so he's basically implied if you don't get me the players I want and a bigger squad, I will leave. So he's sort of using his clout there for the benefit of the club.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But he's got a hell of a, and I'm just counting 1, 2, 9 Portuguese players in that squad, so it very much is basically the Portuguese national team just living in the black country for some surreal reason.
Yeah, like some sort of, it would make a good sitcom. That.
Yeah, and I just think that they'll stay consistent. It's very much, I don't see them finishing outside the top 10. And in terms of beyond, the traditional big six that is very talked about, I don't see. They seem kind of miles ahead of a lot of the ones that will be challenging, and there's just no way that for the foreseeable future they finish outside the top 10. To be honest,
no, I don't think there is. I'm kind of curious to know, Aaron. Like, I want to hear like all in one go because I think that when you get outside the top 7, that's kind of where things become a bit more unpredictable. Who would you put as 8, 9, and 10?
Yeah, we'll go through those quite quickly just for the interest of brevity. So my 8th, I've got Leicester. 9th, I've got Southampton, and 10th is Everton. What about you?
Well, yeah, I've got 2 of those there. So 8th, I've put Southampton 8th. 9 is another curveball. I put Leeds, and then 10th Leicester.
Southampton. So you put Southampton, Leeds,
Yeah,
Leicester, and that completes your top 10.
yeah.
So what's your thinking coming to that? We'll discuss obviously we'll discuss number 8 position first. So since I put Leicester, why did you put Leicester finishing 10th? Just out of interest.
That's a good point. I think just purely in terms of how the second half of the season played out for them, and especially when the Prem came back without crowds, they I'm sorry, they handled it poorly.
Yeah.
They really bottled it there. But that said, the reason why I've put them as 10th, because as opposed to much further down the list, is at the end of the day, they're still a quality side. They bounce back from, just getting rid of Claudio, which was obviously a very stupid decision.
Yeah.
But they're always going to have that underdog edge to them, and no matter what, they're a quality side. Um, but I don't see how they can completely shake off that run of form from last season. So that's kind of why I've put Leicester where they are. With regards to Southampton in eighth, I think conversely, I can't see with the sheer competition in the top seven, I can't see them making that top seven, let alone Europe. But to be fair to them, last season was better than most expected. They have some very high quality players there. They've got those sorts of English players that you like. So like Danny Ings had a tremendous season.
Yeah, absolutely love Danny Ings.
Then you've got Ward Prowse who's signed a new deal with them. He's obviously someone who's been talked about for quite a while, but I think he personally lives up to the standards there. And if you look at their kind of transfer policy at the moment, so they got rid of Lamina, and I think Reed's gone back to Fulham.
Reed has went back to Fulham permanently, and
Yeah.
Lamine has joined Fulham on a loan with an option to buy.
Exactly, and I think so. Loan with an option to buy there. Obviously, Højbjerg's gone to Spurs. I think this is, everything seems to be lining up for a big move for Southampton, or at least some promising, transfer business. So I think they're going to add to the strength that they've already got there. And I genuinely think Danny Ings will have another great season.
Yeah, I'd say so. So since I put Southampton ninth, we'll go with Southampton next. I just think they have a tendency to. I mean, especially in previous years, their squad just gets raided every year, and they rebuild. And it was looking a bit precarious initially. I thought they'd really struggle, but they've sorted themselves out. They've stabilised. They brought in Mohamed Salisu for a very decent sum. Very promising Ghanaian centre back, which is exactly what they needed. Some kind of rigidity. There's rumours that Shane Long might be finally phased out, and Che Adams as well, because he didn't exactly, apart from a couple of worldies, he didn't exactly set the world alight. There's rumours linking them with Danny Welbeck because he has a 4.5 million release clause in his contract now that Watford have been relegated, and I think that'd be a fairly respectable pickup for a team like Southampton. And I just think they're really, really solid. They're a really good club, very good manager. I just don't see them. I see a top 10 finish for them.
Like going into this season, you don't get the impression that they've got much going against them. In the same way that a team like Leicester might. I think they'll definitely pull it away. And then with regards to Leeds, fuck me, it took a while, didn't it? They
certainly took their sweet ass time getting back to the Prem.
It did, but I think now that they're finally there, and yet again, I know it might sound like a bit like kind of wishy-washy bullshit, but they are a huge club, and when they come back, their fans will be such a huge factor for them. The atmosphere. I can imagine Elland Road being a hard place to visit next season. I think the fans will absolutely make it so and create an atmosphere every time. And then if you look at who they've signed, I think Rodrigo will be pretty good for them. Yeah, their record signing. Everything about them screams, a club on the up. And I think when Aston Villa last season came back up, and the immediate knee-jerk reaction was, yo-yo team, bland, going straight back down, and they very almost did. Leeds, they they were absolutely phenomenal last season. I don't think, because I caught them quite a few times on the TV. Not once did I get the impression that they would properly bottle it and not get promoted, or that they would get instantly relegated if they went back up. In fact, they've got such an incredible manager in Bielsa. They play like an exciting European team.
Yeah, they play really good football. They
They
might
do.
not be able to do it all the time now in the Prem, but
No,
or
I
it might
think
not come off as well. But I still think they'll finish very respectably. I don't think they'll be anywhere near the relegation battle, especially if they get going.
they'll have, I can imagine them being a team with good runs and bad runs. They'll be a bit hit and miss, trying to find their feet. But that said, in terms of how they play, in terms of the manager they've got, the signings they've made, it's like how when Wolves were promoted and you knew that they would be there for quite a long time. I don't think they're going to have, quite the success that Wolves are having now. But I think they will shock a few people and finish ninth. And, those are my reasons for thinking that.
Yeah. I had Leeds slightly lower. I had Leeds just missing out on the top 10, finishing 11th. But I wouldn't be too surprised if they did sneak into the top 10. But they definitely, in my view, as well as Rodrigo signing Robin Koch from Freiburg, who's now getting caps for Germany, and centre back is a position that is very, very well filled in the German national team. For them to get hold of him for a reasonable fee is very respectable.
And it's very much the kind of player you need to bring in when you're in the Prem. Like look at what happened to Norwich last season. They had a reputation for being, exciting attacking team, and Pookie had a great run initially, but their defense was dire at times.
Yeah, and not being funny, they got lucky with not just the experienced established stars, but having Godfrey, Lewis, and Aarons come through when they did. They were going to do fair enough. They can do what they want in the Championship, but there's no way a bunch of youngsters can immediately start bossing it in the Prem. So it was almost bound to happen. But we'll save ragging on that dirty club too much for another podcast.
Yeah, it's always the temptation, isn't it?
10th, I put Everton. And I know they had a really diabolical season. Pickford was woeful. Michael Keane and their defence was dog shite, even though they just gave Michael Keane a long-term contract. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
But they look to be making the right moves. They've got Carlo Ancelotti in, who made sure they didn't have a disgraceful season. Hopefully he'll be able to get something out of Moise Keane, because he's a very talented player who just wasn't treated right. He could maybe sort out a very, very porous midfield. Gabamin is coming back in. He was unfortunately injured, having a fit Andrew Gomez. And then also coming in is Alan from Napoli, who's a really good signing. James Rodriguez is meant to be on the way imminently. And also they're very heavily linked with Decore. That's basically a whole new midfield. I think they'll be a completely different prospect. They're not ready yet for European football because, I don't know, I think their defence needs a whole rework other than Digne. And maybe if they make Sidibe permanently, they need at least one or two more centre-backs, I'd say, because Yerry Mina's decent, but I don't rate Michael Keane at all. And I don't think they have much. Mason Holgate's very promising coming through, so is John Joe Kelly. But I think they need they need a big presence in that central back role for them to progress to sort of Europa League standard. But I think they'll do all right. All right. So who have you got for 11th, 12th, and 13th, Jack?
Okay. Yep. Very, very good question, Matt. So for 11th place, I put Sheffield United, 12th Everton, and then 13th Crystal Palace.
All right. So 11th, I've got Leeds. 12th, I've got Brighton. And 13th, I have Sheffield United. So you've got so 11th. Who's again? Leicester. You put 10th, didn't you? 11th was Sheffield United, didn't you
Yeah,
say?
yeah,
Everton
11th was
and then
Sheffield.
Crystal Palace.
Yeah, that's right. So Sheffield United, obviously, they were the dark horse last season, completely unexpected. But to be fair to them, what a job they did. I think the only reason why I think they might lose a bit of momentum and obviously slide down the table, it's kind of obvious in the sense that Dean Henderson is no longer in the picture there. I think he had an incredible season. And for him to essentially only take one season, essentially proving that he should be England's number one, that was incredible to watch. And we all love a good underdog story, don't we? Everton, for the reasons that you said, 12th. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on them because, as you say, Ancelotti seems to know what he's doing with the players he has. I think you're spot on about the need for a defensive rework. But then again, I don't think they're in any real danger of finishing in a seriously low position this season. But yet again, as I say, and I know this is a bit of a cop out in terms of I am here to predict things, but if they rework that defense, if they have a great transfer window, then who knows? It could be that they finish in the top 10. Crystal Palace. It's kind of hard to say much about them right now because I think they've had a very quiet summer. They're one of those teams that are sort of just there, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't seen any evidence or anything to suggest to me that this is the season where they fuck it up. To be fair to Hodgson, yet again another example of a manager who's done pretty well with the players that he's got. I've put them down in 13th because nothing really happening this summer. They're essentially a mid-table Premier League side, aren't they? They haven't been particularly ambitious with who they've signed. They haven't really lost any big names either. So I don't think they're going to slip this season. What are your thoughts on Palace?
Palace, I think, again, they're a mid-table side. That's what they are. They kind of just hope they don't lose Will Zaha, but they're finally on the way out. Jordan Ayew had a very good season. Also, I think the fact that they're in London definitely has pull for players who, want to get into the Prem but aren't good enough for the big ones and want to make a name for themselves, or like a Sacco or a Gary Cahill who still want to stay in the country and still have it, but that especially Cahill didn't have to move too far from Chelsea, still gets to live in London. There's very much that appeal. I've got them down in 15th. Like if I run through all but the bottom four, I've got 11th Leeds, Brighton, Sheffield United, Newcastle, Crystal Palace in 15th, and then Burnley in 16th. But I just think that, if they lose Zaha, they'll struggle, but I think they'll recruit enough well. They did well in getting Eberiche, Eze from QPR. I think he'll do a good job for them. They tend to recruit decently. They'll just stay about. They're not going to set the world alight, but they'll be there. Quite like Brighton for 12th because I think Lallana on a free is a good bit of business. They're linked with this very promising Argentinian striker called Darwin Núñez. They've got Mopai, who's really good, Trossard, Pascal Gross. A lot of players I really like. Ben White's coming back into the fold because they refused multiple advances for Leeds, who are desperate to keep him. They've got Lewis Dunk as well, who's really good. I think they're just a hell of a team. And I like the way they play. I like the way Graham Potter's style of football. I like their recruitment. I just think they're a very good club. They're very fun to watch, and I very much enjoy them. Sheffield United, kind of the ravages of time, and I just think apart from Sanderberg, he's very very promising and some pretty good like fullbacks and Osborne and his centre backs and O'Connell and Egan. They just don't have any like like proper star players. If you ask me who Sheffield United's star player was, I wouldn't tell you. I think it's very much more about the team and
Yeah.
how Chris Wilder sets it up than anything. And I think, especially with Dean Henderson, they really overachieved. Ramsdale's a good goalie, but he's not Dean Henderson's level yet. And I think that they'll probably reach their level, which is an upper, challenge, trying to get into the top 10, sort of finishing around 10th to 15th.
Yeah.
Kind of that just seems like very much the standard squad they are. They seem very much to be taking over. They spend a lot more than Burnley, but they very much kind of seem to be overtaking Burnley in that kind of no particularly eye-catching. There's players. They're certainly not a one-man club in the same way like a Villa or a Palace are, but they're just really, really solid, compact. They've got a very good manager who loves the club, knows what he's doing, gets given the leeway to do what he wants. It just seems like a very perfect fit for them.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. Did you want me to run through the 14th, 15th, 16th as well?
Yes, please, if that's all right, mate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, 14th Newcastle United. I think there's just nothing to say about Newcastle really. Just again,
you were the same on that, especially since like their takeover fell through in quite comedically hilarious fashion.
Oh yeah, it's just they've kind of got the Palace thing for me in the sense that they're just there.
Yeah,
they're not in any real trouble. They're just there. 15th I put Burnley, and then 16th I put Villa.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I put Newcastle 14th just for the reason that their takeover fell through. They're going to get sucked into a relegation battle. Steve Bruce did a great job in not keeping that keeping that side up last season. He deserves to be backed a bit more this season, but he won't be. Their only signing that I've seen so far is Jeff Hendrick on a free from Burnley. And considering they're banging on about getting Bale and Coutinho at the start of the season, it's, very different sort of targets now being mooted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like them and Callum Wilson. They might get Ryan Fraser on a free, but a lot of, top, like lower top half of the table to mid-table teams, they all seem to want Ryan Fraser on a free. So, because he's a really good player, and I think he could really have his pick of where he wants to go, to be honest. As long as he's reasonable with his wage demands, I think he could probably do better than Newcastle. I see a lot of sleeping giant rhetoric about Newcastle, but that giant must be in a fucking coma at this point because I see no signs of rising.
No.
No.
It's they're just. You're quite right. There's just no signs of rising there, and I think just the humiliation of the bid failing, and they're a bit of a busted flush in my opinion.
I think the wind has been taken entirely out of their sails because it was delayed so far that they haven't had really time to. They have to start their recruitment process basically from scratch when the takeover didn't go through.
Yeah,
just none at the club, including Steve Bruce, really knew what was going on.
So you feel like they're only kind of catching up and making contingencies now. So I think that the start of the season will take them a bit by surprise as well. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're anywhere near worrying about relegation. I still think, as you say, they'll be able to draw in, quite a bit of talent in this transfer window, and with the squad they've already got, I'd put them comfortably in that kind of lower mid-table position.
Yeah, that seems very much their area. And now we'll save the bottom four for a bit. But for 16th, I believe you put Villa, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, or as some people unkindly know them, Jack Grealish and friends. They have some other decent players there. Tyrone Mings, former Town boy, very, very good. Marvelous Nakamba, I rate. Douglas Luiz looked really good if they can keep hold of him. El Ghazi and Trezeguet can do a job. McGinn's solid. They're they're okay. They've got the building blocks. If they recruit smartly, they could very much easily end up like 10th to 15th.
Oh yeah, I think now that because it was very much like I know many will put Villa in their predictions to in the bottom three, but I think just the saving yourself by the skin of your teeth on the final day, I think that kind of sums up Villa for me. They're quite a jammy side, but as you said, they've got the building blocks for something now. And I think this transfer window, as a result, because I think they do have the money behind them. They are a big club in terms of support, in terms of how many people they can fit into a stadium.
In terms of money,
geography, because they are effectively the team of
the Midlands.
This country, yeah, the Midlands, the second biggest city in the country. They are a big club. And I think after what happened last season, they won't be, they'll be very, very cautious. In terms of they will have to make sure their squad is completely up to the job. I think we haven't quite seen the full potential of what they're going to do in their transfer window. But I dare say they will bring in the right players, and especially with Grealish's performance last season, it's the case that if he does end up going, it won't be without huge compensation, clearly. But if he stays, I think he'll do wonders this season, especially now he's got that Premier League experience, and now that he's looking to be getting England experience as well. But that's kind of why I've put them as 16th. So, not quite there yet. A very kind of similar finish to last season's 17th, but perhaps a bit more comfortable from Villa this season.
Yeah, that makes sense. I put Burnley in there just because they've lost Hendrick on a free. They might lose Chris Wood and Dwight McNeil. And even when they do sell, they don't have money to replace anyone. So it's the fact Sean Dyche, very similar to Eddie Howe, is keeping Burnley in the Premier League by sheer force of will. And I think if he ever left, they'd just get relegated. I just don't see any other manager that could keep them up. And Nick Pope's great. I think he's definitely too good to be at the club. But I understand why he's there, because he's, their regular number one. He's at the Premier League. But I think certainly if they did get relegated, he wouldn't play Championship football the following season.
No, and I think you're quite right there. Like, it makes a lot of sense why he's there. You're quite right. He's their number one keeper. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who your Premier League team is, really. If you're starting for a Premier League squad, as a first choice keeper, you're in with a good shout of playing for England, and especially with what's happened to Pickford as well. I can imagine Pope being quite reluctant to throw away that position. I think you're quite right. He's too good for the club. But in terms of, I'm also here scratching my head thinking, where would he go in the Prem, where he would consistently get games? What team would be that much better than Burnley, where he could see consistent football? I think it'd be quite interesting to almost see him at Sheffield United. I think he could definitely fill that Henderson gap.
They've signed Ramsdale from
but exactly, yeah, that's the thing. They've got Ramsdale. That seems to be, he will be, their first choice, which is quite regrettable for Sheffield United. I feel like they should be a bit more ambitious, but then again, obviously, they don't exactly have a huge budget. I kind of agree with your feeling about Burnley. Dyche is doing an Eddie Howe there. I've put them down to 15th, which is obviously, a bit of a knock from last season, but with him at the helm, I can't see them going down.
No, I just think he's too good. He knows exactly how to keep that team up. And in terms of where Nick Pope would go, I was just checking how old he is. He's 28, which is surprising because he doesn't seem like he's been.
No.
Well, he's had a very much a journeyman career. He only played for Bury Town, obviously, where we're from.
Yeah.
And then he went to Charlton for 5 years, but spent all of that on loan before Burnley signed him. And now he's arguably competing. He's number one, depending on who you ask, if you prefer Henderson or him.
Yeah.
And Charlton must be kicking themselves because they just wasted him.
Oh yeah, Town will be kicking themselves as well because he came through our youth system, I believe.
Yeah, it's a shame that we didn't get that one right. I don't know if they were brave enough. I know goalkeepers age, have a few more years in them than outfield midfielders do. But if Tottenham were looking to do the replacement process for Lloris, or if Wolves replaced Patricio because he was getting old, or Leicester were looking to accepted a decent bid for Schmeichel, I don't think he'd leave there. But those are the sort of clubs I could see him going to.
Yeah,
and being even Chelsea. I'd take Pope over Kepa any day, to be honest, and he wouldn't be exorbitantly expensive, so they'd have money to spend on strengthening if they wanted to buy another centre back or a central midfielder or whatever, or right back or whatever. They could continue the rebuild. But I think they're probably saving up for like a more marquee signing, and I could see Chelsea fans moaning about only getting Nick Pope.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they are quite sanctimonious, and they do have quite high standards. But yeah, I agree. But yeah, I think exactly what you said as well. Even if they did a Bournemouth, let's say they finish 18th and they go down this season, Pope won't play in the Championship. He'll be gone.
There's no way, because he'd want to. Not saying that he's not like he's fickle or anything. A lot of players obviously they only have a limited career, a finite time, and they want to be playing at the highest level possible. But I don't think Pope would forego his England career to stay at Burnley. I just doubt. I really don't think it, because obviously Butland I don't know whether he got priced out of moving to Stoke or he wanted to stay, but Stoke have went to shit since, and it's kind of a cautionary tale because their form went to shit, and he's obviously not even in the conversation for England call-ups anymore, which is a shame because he was meant to be, at least in my mind, the next big thing in terms of he was very much one of England's potential next number one goalkeepers, wasn't he, at a time?
Yeah. God.
Yeah. So if we move to bottom four,
yes.
Yeah, I have got 17th Aston Villa, 18th Fulham, 19th West Ham, and 20th West Brom. Who have you got?
Yes, so kind of similar. For 17th, I've put Brighton. For 18th, I have got Fulham. 19th, West Ham. 20th, West Brom.
Yeah. So I'll just briefly touch on Villa because we've already went in. They're looking into if they got like a Callum Wilson or a Josh King or a Ollie Watkins, or maybe two out of those three. I think they'll be fine because they definitely just need a striker, because Wesley and Sambata were both absolutely pitiful. Just total dog shit, both of them. Get rid of them. But I think their best signing is if they get Grealish on a new deal, because Man United were the most interested in him, and now they've signed Van der Beek and Fernandes. I don't know, it would be pointless, especially for 70, 80 million, which they'd want for him. I just think he's there to stay, unless Leicester's signed James Maddison to a contract, Chelsea have signed Kai Havertz. I don't think Arsenal can afford him, and I don't think Spurs will get him either. So I think he's staying there for at least another season, and
Yeah,
I think him and some sensible signings will keep them up. I know I put them 17th, and I don't expect another last day shithouse. I think they could easily again. There's not much between 10th and 20th. There's it's injuries and some bad runs of forms and some stupid tactics and some just bad or dumb luck.
yeah.
Villa, I think, aren't definitely nailed on for a relegation battle. I just see other teams being slightly better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in my case, in terms of where I put Villa, I can just imagine other teams being especially worse. And, the first one that seems to me, even though I didn't put them in that, in the 20th place position, even though I put them in 19th, West Ham seem like an obvious choice for relegation this year. It seems like they haven't really learned from their mistakes. I have not seen anything in the transfer window that's impressed me for them. The atmosphere around the club right now is dire. And I think they were lucky with the teams that they were playing towards the end of the season. That was quite a big factor in them staying up. Whereas this season, no, they're definitely going down. It's kind of a similar reason why I put Fulham for 18th. I don't think they've been ambitious enough with who they've signed, which is quite bizarre because you associate Fulham with being, quite a well-off club, especially when they're in the Championship.
Yeah.
But they never really seem to sign anyone that makes you think twice. And then I just wanted to touch upon this because I noticed we were both in agreement for West Brom final place. Is there any particular reason why you've put them there?
Personally, for me, I think their signings are predicated on. I think their signings have just been, making some of their loans from last season permanently. And the only other people I've seen them seriously linked with is Shane Duffy, who obviously is a very decent, mid-table centre back pickup for a Premier League side. Very respectable player. Obviously, Brighton might be looking to cash in because their top centre back choices will probably be Dunk and Ben White next year because they were so dead set against losing him. But we actually discussed this informally in that there's been reports about how the owner Lai Guochuan, who has a net worth of 2.8 billion, by the way, is refusing to spend any money. It's not that he has the money; it's that he won't. And
he's like a Chinese Mike Ashley.
Pretty much, that's the reports I've been reading, and also there's this massive issue in terms of apparently it is really, really difficult to get big sums of money out of China because the Communist Party is very, very paranoid about capital flight out of the country. And so they've been a lot more strict about rich businessmen abroad and their finances. So I think that might have something to do with it. But also, if he is doing that, like, what's the point of him having the club? He got them in the Prem. There's the prestige factor. It probably helps networking with his other businesses. He might want to sell it on at a profit, but it just seems like they're going to go nowhere. They haven't recruited anyone. They're saying that, some clubs can go straight back up, like Villa or Fulham, and spend 100 million, and it maybe works out, maybe doesn't. But I've seen that West Brom won't even, it's too steep for them to even pay 25 million quid for Ben Rama or Ollie Watkins from Brentford, who were easily the two best players in the Championship last season.
And both of who could do wonders in the Prem. They'd definitely be able to lift West Brom out of that 20th place. But no, you're absolutely right. It's just when before the season has started, before like the first ball has even been kicked, and the news cycle is negative for your club, to that extent, it's hard to see how they're going to be inspired out of that.
Yeah, I don't see it. There's like the stat. I know Sheffield United. People saying, "Oh, they'll go down," and they really proved us wrong. But I was like, well, they could do a job. I was like, they'll probably go down, but it won't be humiliated. They won't be humiliated. Those were my thoughts last season.
Yeah, it's yet another classic case of they had nothing to lose.
Yeah, but like with Norwich last season and this season, just they have the stench of death about them. They're gonna go. I think they're gonna go straight back down, and anyone decent will move on afterwards. Like they've Kieran Gibbs, probably one of their few experienced Premier League players. He's not exactly amazing. Livermore's fine. And then who have they got who they can sell on afterwards? Like their top scorers with like 10 goals apiece were Charlie Austin, who is solid, and Hal Robson-Kanu, who are both 31. And then other than Pereira, who they've just signed, and those two, and I don't see anyone there who's definitely going to be going to do a job. I just don't see anything in that squad at all.
No, I think you're quite right there.
Another one we're going. Do you want to move on to Fulham, because I think we've pretty much shat on West Brom enough. It almost feels like bullying, and we're town fans, you know.
Yeah, it does feel like some cyberbullying against her. Yeah. We just get an angry tweet from Charlie Austin's mum. Fulham, I think, I think it's kind of similar to West Brom in the sense that there seems to be some, they haven't made any signings in particular that have caught our attention yet. But they also have that stench of death about them, don't they?
Yeah.
The exact same stench.
It just seems like, there's no, even though they've just been promoted, they kind of squeaked through the playoffs and did it against Brentford, who I think a lot of people were more excited about seeing. But they just don't look convincing. I mean, obviously, doesn't the transfer window run to October now or something stupid just for the season?
Yeah, just for this season, yeah.
Yeah, and I know they've had to loan out a lot of their a few of their decent players when they got relegated because they couldn't afford their wages, and that they might come back in or they might sell them on to restructure the squad a bit. And John Michael Seri, which is mad, and is one of those ones coming back, which is mad to me how Nice screwed him out of a move to Barcelona, and he ended up at Fulham. Played 32 times, scored once. Had a very respectable loan spell last season at Galatasaray, 27 games, 2 goals. Not incredible, but they didn't exercise. They had an option to buy, and they didn't exercise it, which is interesting. So he might not have it. They might be just looking to shift him on. They might listen to bids. They've got Fabry, a 13-year-old goalkeeper who played twice for them before they were relegated, and then was loaned out to Mallorca. Played once for them. He's back in the squad. He's shite, so he's not going to go anywhere near it.
No.
The only X factor is Zambo Anguissa, who was decent for them when they were last in the Prem. Absolutely tore it up for Villarreal last season by all accounts, and then they couldn't afford him, and then Valencia let them have Danny Parejo on a free, their best player. But that, if we went down that rabbit hole, we'd be there for another hour. How poorly ran Valencia is right now.
Exactly. We've already cyberbullied Norwich and West Brom without pissing off the Spanish clubs as well. We'll just get like a cease and desist letter.
Yeah, but I think they could. They're one of those ones that if they're well organised and that they could finish like low mid table. But again, stench of death. But I'm quite conscious of time, so we'll just briefly touch on the other team, Ham United, who we both think are going down. And
Yeah.
fuck me, what a delicious shit show of a season they had. They sacked Pellegrini. Fabianski was injured. Their second choice goalkeeper, Roberto, was the worst goalkeeper I've seen in the Prem in quite some time. And then their third choice keeper, David Martin, who they probably signed just to piss off Millwall fans, actually did a job for them.
It's like there's something about West Ham, isn't there? Where like last season they had a shit show and it was enjoyable to watch, and everyone thought it was enjoyable to watch. Like you can't quite put your finger on why, but they're just not a very popular club, are they? So I think there will be many who would revel to see them go down this season.
I think the fact is that their owners are quite dislikable. I don't care that they sold porn; that's irrelevant to me. But like they just look like they just seem like knobs, and I think it's because they've got such a massive stadium, such huge resources, like big political connections. Clearly, because if you look into the deal and how they got the Olympic Stadium, they absolutely bent the taxpayer over both barrels, and it's not surprising.
Oh no, it's like, and yeah, when you consider, the big clubs in London, regionally, they're kind of unchallenged as East London's team. They have a huge following there. They're a pretty well established club. Obviously nowhere near the level of the other big London clubs, but you feel like they shouldn't be in this mess.
No, definitely not. I mean, they've got all the resources. They've spent so much money on players for them to be diabolical. It just shouldn't have happened, but it has, and it's just Schadenfreude. Like my team's in League One. Your team's got this much money and is still really bad. We played you in a friendly, and our midfield in the first half absolutely played you off the park.
Yeah.
It's a joke. And again, they've had ever since they left Upton Park, the stench of death has just gotten stinkier in that club, and I think it's the year they finally croak.
Oh no, but that's the thing though. I think with regards to this season, because the start will be behind closed doors, I think they'll have that initial advantage because they're used to having no atmosphere and having crowd sounds played through the speakers.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one advantage they've got over the other Prem clubs.
Yeah, they're probably used to a miserable atmosphere more so than others, so that could work in its favour initially. But I just see them bottling it so bad, and apparently
it would be like a miserable atmosphere minus like a few angry Cockney gammons in their Stone Island jackets yelling at them.
Yeah, so if anything, it will be a more pleasant environment for them. But yeah, so that was our predictions. Jack, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure, man.
This has been the Hoodcast Premier League roundup. Feel free to comment, to subscribe if you have some opinions. Share them if you want. Thank you very much, Jack. I've been Aaron Hood. As always, stay safe, stay inside when you can, stay hydrated, and wear a mask, you morons. Thank you. Bye.
Drink water.
Drink plenty of water.